Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from Daniel's 11th chapter. We made it all the way up till the 20th verse. We're going to take it from the 21st all the way to the end, at least try and make it that far. But this chapter is a vision given to him of Michael the Archangel, recorded by Daniel. And prophecy, it's been said, is history in reverse. So if history is a recording of events after they transpire, prophecy is those events before they transpire. And of these two, prophecy is to be trusted above history, because history is marred by the passions and prejudices of the author, whereas the author of prophecy is the Almighty, and the men he selects to be his mouthpiece are sacred and righteous men who give us wise warnings. But in the previous 20 verses, Daniel, he transcribes with uncanny accuracy. He doesn't name any of the figures. He doesn't give any of the dates. He just identifies them by, he describes the Greek power struggle which exists after Alexander, which will occur after they are displaced by the Persians, to whom he is currently in employment of. And so we read, with the gift of historical hindsight, we are able to connect these to the names of the figures alluded to and when they reigned and who they were. But Daniel didn't need to know the names. He recorded faithfully what Gabriel had given him, and it transpired in the order as unfolded. So this is very much historically accurate prophecy, even though it's not the most historically informative prophecy. We won't know, without the hindsight of history, we'd have no way of knowing who these kings were and when they reigned. And the king of the south, which is emblematic of Egypt, which became one of the two main power struggles after the division of the kingdom of Alexander, who died without leaving a designated successor in 323 BM, and then the king of the north, which was the dynasty founded by Seleucid. And the kings of the north are the kings of the south rather are consistently Ptolemies. We met Ptolemy 1 through 5 in the first 20 verses, and the kings of the north are either named Antigonus or Seleucus. And in the 21st verse, we read of, from here on, this describes a lot of details of what we read of and overlaps in the book of Maccabees, which is in the Deuterocanonicals. And the figure, it narrows down the concentration and energy, focuses down to one, a man by the name of Antiochus IV, surnamed Epiphanes, which translates as he of glory, who came to the throne in 175 through deceit and subterfuge. So the opening verse reads, "And in his place shall arise a despised one, to whom they shall not give the excellency of the rule, but he shall come in peaceably and see the rules by flatteries." So the throne was technically, the designated heir was Demetrius Soter, who was the young son of Antiochus's brother. He had no he had somewhat of a claim to the throne, but it was generally recognized that Demetrius Soter was the designated rule. He seizes power by posing as his legal guardian, at least until he's of age of rule. But as we read, Antiochus has no interest in sharing power. He is a selfish man, and he is described as despicable because not only what he did to attain the throne, despicable is in other translations, but what he did once on the throne, which qualifies him for that character. "And the arms of the flood shall be swept away from before him, and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant." The prince of the covenant would have been the Jewish high priest. We learn more about him in a later chapter. "And after they joined him, he shall work deceit, and shall come up and become strong with a small nation." So by the appeasement and collaboration of these Jewish traders, he would gain strength and control over their country through their passive inaction and silent and even vocal accommodations of his plea or his pretext and his power grabs. He shall enter peaceably even into the richest place of the province, and do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers, distribute among them plunder and spoil and supplies, and devise his plots against the strongholds, but only for a time. So in Antiochus IV, we have a preview of the end-time dictator known as the anti-Messiah, who rises to power. He's going to squash, the world's going to be at war, he's going to squash it, he's going to enter as a peacemaker, but then his true tyrannical character is going to be revealed after a 3.5-year period. And the richest places in the province would have been the temple. That would have been where all of the most valuable and precious and expensive items of jewelry and silverware and semi-precious stones would have been in Judea. And he would scheme his way in there. This was something none of his predecessors had done, none of his royal progenitors had done, and he would conspire and plot against the strongholds, but only for a time. We do read that, or we do know, rather, that Antiochus contracted a painful disease whilst in Persia in 163 BM, but in his short rule from, or his whatever rule from 175 to 163, he not only wreaked a lot of havoc, but set a warning to future generations of the anti-Messiah to come. And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but not stand, for they shall devise plots against him. This king of the south is Ptolemy VI, surnamed Philometor, who reigned from 181 to 146 BM, and twice in the years between the years 170 and 168, Antiochus IV invaded or attacked Egypt. So there's going to be war between them. There's going to be violent confrontation, and all the might and muster and muscle of his army that he summons will not stand, because there's going to be scheming and conspiracies against them. And those who have been eating his food shall destroy him, and his army be swept away, and many fall down slain. So those who trusted most, those who had intimate exposure and access to giving him advice, would be the ones who would betray him, and his army would be destroyed as a result of their betrayal, and there will be severe casualties because of the slaughtering of his army. And both these kings' hearts are to do evil and speak lies at the same table, but not prosper, for the end is still for an appointed time. So both of these kings, both Ptolemy and Antiochus, were of equally, perhaps not equally, but in any case, evil nature, and they were used to prone to lies and deceit and subterfuge to both usurp the throne in Antiochus's case and to give promises with no bearing in reality at the diplomatic table. But he says none of their scheming is going to prosper, because wickedness by itself is an unsustainable foundation for any idea or action to flourish on for a long period of time. Then he shall return to his land with much supplies, and his heart be against the sacred covenant, and he shall act, and shall return to his land. So after his military venture in Egypt, he's going to make his way up north to the province which the Romans called Palestine, but it would have been the location where the covenant people dwelt. That would have been Judah at this time. And he did he entered into Jerusalem in 167 BM, and he plundered the temple in 170. So as we read, it did not take him too long once there to reveal his true intents and evil motives. At the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall be not like the former or the latter. So he's going to repeat an action, but the outcome is going to be different from what comes before it and what comes after. This is going to the south with military incursion against Egypt, but the outcome is not going to be like what came before it or what comes after. For ships from Kittim shall come against him, and he shall lose heart, and shall return in rage against the sacred covenant, and shall act, and shall return, and consider those who forsake the sacred covenant. Now, whilst en route in this military venture, he found himself encircled by the Roman general Popilius Linnaeus, who forces him to a decision. The translation of Kittim is of the west. That's known as Rome in the Hebrew terminology. And this general by that name would encircle him and leave him essentially with two options: challenge the military might of Rome while he is contending with his rival to the south, or retreat and withdraw. And so Antiochus chooses the latter option. And because he retreats from his expansionist policies, he's going to wreak havoc and devastation on an already subjugated people. And he's going to give preference and favor to those traitorous Jews who do not keep the covenant. He's trying to abolish it and do away with it and replace it with his own religion. And there are some Jews who are only too pliable to accommodate these nefarious designs. And strong ones shall arise from him, and profane the temple, the stronghold, and shall take away that which is continual, and place the abomination that lays waste. So in December 14th, 196, or 168 rather, he entered into the temple at Jerusalem, the one that had been reconstructed by Ezra or under his leadership, and he establishes an altar to Zeus, who was the mightiest deity in the Greek polytheistic pantheon. And he sacrifices to him pigs to add insult to injury. Pig was the uncleanest animal by the the Mosaic dietary standards. And so he's not getting rid of sacrifices altogether. He's just getting rid of the ones to whom they are owned in his own home. And he's sacrificing to Zeus. And this is the abomination warned about, one of the abominations of Daniel 9:27. There would be several other by Romans who would do terrible things to the temple, but and also this has an end time allusion and application, which is yet to fully reveal itself. There are theories about which warns them, but that's ultimately distracting ourselves from the context we should be focusing on. And by flatteries he shall profane those who do wickedness against the covenant. But the people who know their Elohim shall be strong and shall act. So he's a spellbinding orator who persuades many Jewish people who don't know any better to abandon the covenant, which is the secret source of their strength. But there's always a faithful remnant. There are those committed to upholding the covenant, and these were concentrated on a Jewish priest by the name of Matthias, who had 5 sons, one of which was Judas Maccabeus. The surname chosen indicates the hammer, and he is going to be the one who restores the temple to its proper and ultimately liberates the Jewish people from their Greek overlords temporarily, not long after they succumb to the snares of Rome. But that's in the book of Maccabees. Here it's concentrating on the actions of Antiochus IV. And those of the people who have insight shall give understanding to many, and they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering for days. So in the 12th chapter, he reads of the exponential expansion of the theological knowledge towards the end times that we are living in today. But he also, there's a prelude here in that there are people who have insight, who teach understanding. They persuade the Jews to honor their end of the covenant, but they're going to be persecuted by sword and flame, and they're going to be taken in bondage, and they're going to subject their sacred place, their sacred temple to plundering and looting. But it is all worth it when we stand strong in the covenant, which makes us strong. And when they stumble, they shall be helped a little help, but many shall join them by flatteries. So the division is always there. They're going to be the traitorous Jews and the loyal Jews, and the way that he gets the remnant is small but powerful and faithful, and because their faith is in Yahweh, the size of the army is of no bearing on his ability to conquer it. There is no giant too tall nor army too large for any force, however many people, of one who is fully submitted to Yahweh and wearing his armor and fighting his battles. And some of those who have insight shall stumble, to refine them, and to cleanse them, and to make them white, until the time of the end, for it is still an appointed time. This gives literal meaning and application to the furnace of affliction, because these wise insight men will have the temptation to forsake the covenant at the threat of being burned alive at the stake. Some of them do, some of them don't. The ones that did are wearing the martyr's crown in heaven today, while those who did not are going to have already answered for their cowardice at the judgment. And the king shall do as he pleases, and exalt himself, and show himself to be above every mighty one, and speak incredible matters against the of mighty ones, and shall prosper until the wrath has been accomplished. For what has been decreed shall be done. So this king has a serious God complex, and we know and understand that the Ptolemies, being enmeshed in the Egyptian culture which they conquered, would have kept the office of Pharaoh in continuity, and the Pharaoh, since the Old Kingdom had been considered a living god, there's no evidence of any consistency of that in the Seleucid or Persian empires, although in Daniel 6 we do read that Cyrus's deceptive courtiers flatter him into proclaiming himself a god for a 30-day period to trap Daniel when he emerges unscathed from the lion's den. I did one on that. You can type in Corey Johnston, Daniel 6 for more on that. But this, he has an arrogance which considers himself not only equal to, but greater than any god. So he is severely deluded, and this preempts or gives a premonition to the ultimate act of rebellion of mankind when the anti-Messiah sits in the temple in Jerusalem. The temple will be rebuilt. Most likely you and I will live to see this, and he will declare himself God, much as Lucifer did, and he tried to convince and compel Adam and Eve to, and as Antiochus himself did, and he's going to consider himself to be supreme. Now, the anti-Messiah will be fully submitted to Satan, but Antiochus is wholly, just considers himself to be exalted above not only every other human living, but every other god imagined. And have no regard for the mighty ones of his father, nor for the desire of women, nor have regard for any mighty ones, but exalt himself above them all. So the mighty ones of his fathers would have been the Greek polytheistic deities. He is not, he is against all religion in any form, which distracts any worship of himself. And the desire of women would have been the Canaanite fertility and Egyptian fertility deities and those in the adjacent Near East, but they all don't matter to him. They're all equally useless. They're all equally impotent in his own mind. Because he alone is supreme and he exalts himself above them all. So he's not claiming equality with divinity, he's claiming superiority. This is one sick and deluded man. But in his place he shall give esteem to a mighty one of strongholds, and to a mighty one which his fathers did not know. He shall give esteem with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. So he's going to invent a god. He's going to displace the entire inherited traditions of Greek polytheism with his own manufactured god, to whom he's going to honor with riches and treasures in the temple that he's going to construct throughout his kingdom. And he shall act against the strongest strongholds with the foreign mighty one, which he shall acknowledge. He shall increase in esteem, and cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. So this self-worship, endeavor, and exercise has a divisive effect, which because he's not honoring the traditionally recognized deities of his Greek subjects, who fight for him and protect him and keep the native Persian people whom they rule over control. They're not going to be for him once he does that, and he met his end, as we read in 163, contracting a painful disease in the midst of Persia. Now, in the 40th verse, this takes on at the time of the end. In other words, there is no historical precedent for the kings of the south or kings of the north, nor any historical hindsight as to precisely which nations these are, but they do pertain to the end times. So much of the struggle which preceded between the king of the north and the south is going to be revamped to the unidentified kingdom of the south and the unidentified kingdom of the north, whose kings' names we know not yet. So at the time of the end, the king of the south shall push at him, and the king of the north rush against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter the lands, and shall overflow and pass over. Now he's describing ancient military technology, but the vision he describes like a whirlwind. So the thing about Daniel, often modern interpretations equate locusts to helicopters, for instance, when we read of this ancient and antiquated military technology, such as chariots and horsemen. The modern cavalry is the tank. But in any case, this is what he's going to have, and this is what he's going to use to enter the land and pass over it and overflow it while en route. And he shall enter the splendid land, and many shall stumble, but these escape from his hands, Edom and Moab, and the chief of the sons of Ammon. So the splendid land would have been the promised land, the land of milk and honey, to which Daniel was born in and prayed towards every day, but had no life experience in after the age of 15. But by this time, the Jews are fully restored and reinstated in their promised land, but some of them are going to stumble, much like their ancestors did in the days of Antioch. They would have chosen the path of expedience above obedience. The expedient thing to do would be to comply to this earthly ruler who has the power of the sword above the Elohim, who has the power of judgment in his hands, who is going to reward them. And he's going to pass over and touch on the land of Edom, which is no longer a nation. They were eradicated by the Babylonians, whom they betrayed. They entered into an alliance we read of in the book of Obadiah. I did one on that. You can type in Corey Johnston, Obadiah. They form an alliance with Babylon and partake in the plundering of Jerusalem. And Moab and Ammon are the respective nations born of the incestuous liaison of Lot, whose own daughters get him drunk and seduce him, and collectively form nations. And he shall stretch out his hand against the lands, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So there's going to be nothing in Egypt's power to withstand or resist or rebel or overcome the power of this force lined against them. Now, the land of Egypt is actually connected to the kingdom of the south, so there's going to be a new revival, a neo-Egyptian revival in the end times. And he shall rule over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the riches of Egypt, and Libyans, and Cushites shall be at his steps. The Cushites would have been the Ethiopians. That was the Hebrew name for them. Libyans is what corresponds to the modern country of Libya, but he's going to take all their wealth, he's going to plunder it all, keep it all for himself, take it away from them. And he's going to use these nations, these African nations, as footstools to step on and trample over, to abuse and exploit extract their material resources from. Then reports from the east and the north shall disturb him, and he shall go out with great wrath to destroy and put many under the ban. So while concentrating his military efforts and energies in the south, some trouble is going to arise in the east and the north, which will temporarily distract him from continuing further in the south, and he's going to come up with great wrath. He's going to be livid. He's going to be angry. He's going to be destructive in intent to place many under the ban. The ban does carry anti-Messiah connotations. We read that he's going to have a mark on all those without which it is impossible to engage in commerce. And many modern theorists predict that the chips, which many globalist New World Order conspirators are conspiring to place in every human body at a certain place of time. And he shall pitch the tents of his palace between the seas and the splendid sacred mountains, but shall come to his end with none to help him. So in spite of amassing and accumulating and forming and consolidating this great empire, he's going to be bereft of allies. Eventually it's just going to be him and himself all alone in his palace with no one to protect him, no one to fight for him. So he's going to meet his end in splendid loneliness, and his palace is going to be between the seas. We can gather that's between the Mediterranean and the Black or somewhere, and the sacred mountain would have been Zion, but he's going to meet his end and no one's going to help him. And this is, if not the anti-Messiah himself, then certainly one of his predecessors. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.